Hello, everyone. Welcome to Echoes from the History Center. I'm your host, Tom O'Grady, and I'm here with Larry Groce and Erin Augenstein. And we're going to be talking about a new musical that these folks are involved in producing to some great extent and who they're connected with. And it's called One Vote. So let's get started. Welcome, Larry. Welcome, Erin.
Hi,
Thanks,
Tom.
Tom.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
So I should probably give a little bit of background on who you guys are. Larry Gross is the co-founder of the NPR program Mountain Stage in Charleston, West Virginia, and he's working on this with Todd Burge, who also has performed down there. And you guys are musicians and producers and radio program and also playwrights, huh? And Erin is the executive director of Campus Martius Museum in Marietta. And isn't that's under evolution right now? It's becoming some other Northwest Territories museum or something, or
Well,
is it Ohio River?
our organization is the Northwest Territory Museum Society, and we act as the site managers of Campus Martius Museum and the Ohio River Museum on behalf of Ohio History Connection, and we're executive producing One Vote the Musical. So the Northwest Territory Museum Society gives us the name and helped us with some of the planning to be able to do more than just manage those two sites.
Great. So to get started, why don't we start with you, Larry? You're the one who came up with this idea about one vote. You know, what made you do this? How'd you come up with this? It's not right up your alley, is it? Exactly.
No, it's not. But like so many people, I read McCullough's book, The Pioneers. Okay. At the same time, I was working with Todd on doing a project and took me to Marietta, and we met with some people who were involved in that project. They were some of the leaders of the town and so forth. And I just asked them, it seemed obvious to me that there could be something called Marietta the Musical, something like that, because the story is pretty interesting to say the least. And McCullough's book was a good introduction to it, and also got me stirred her up as it did him, I guess, and it does anybody who doesn't know. When you read this, your first inclination is to say, how come nobody knows about this? Now, people do, but the general public doesn't seem to. And it seems to be a pretty important part of American history to me that we don't learn about, and that this little place here, in the end, they kept slavery out of Ohio. I mean, well, how important is that? So that's how it got started.
And so while you were over there, you met Erin.
Yeah, well, I didn't meet Erin right away because we thought we were going to organize it another way, through another organization. That didn't work. And then we contacted Erin because we were looking for a home. We were trying to create a company, uh, theatrical company. And to do that, of course, you need to be 501(c)(3). And so we either had to make one of those ourselves or we had to find somebody to be our home. And we talked with Erin, and she seemed receptive to it. And it seemed perfect that a history museum would be the home for this, because we're trying to portray the history correctly. We want to make an entertaining musical, of course, but we would like to have it correct, so that if someone came to see this and they said, "Oh, did this really happen?" in 1788, and we would say, "Yeah, this is the way that happened." Or did they really meet at the Bunch of Grapes Tavern? Yeah, they really did. So we want to have a lot of that, and we wanted to have somebody to help us to back us up and introduce us to people like you, Tom, who know the history, who've known it for years. And so we met a lot of people and talked with them. And starting out with Linda Showalter at the over there at the where they have the archives at Marietta College, the same woman who helped out McCullough, right? Well, we met with her at the very beginning to talk about, ask her questions. Basically, we were just learning the story. She knew the story, and she had a whole bunch of original material that she was willing to let us look at.
Okay, so in this 5 minutes that we've been talking or so, I don't think we have told anybody what the heck it is we're talking about. It's an important story, and McCullough's been involved. David McCullough, the last book he wrote after writing all these other things. One vote. Why don't you? Who can summarize that in a line or two? What's it about? One vote.
Well, it's about the people who settled Marietta, and in order to do so, they had to get slightly involved with the Northwest Ordinance, and they had to get involved with the Continental Congress because there was no constitution or president yet. And then they came out to Marietta, and they had all the problems that people did on the frontier, all of the move America westward problems and challenges. But then they also had one more because the Northwest Ordinance wouldn't allow slavery. And we didn't have that in our Constitution in the end, but that was the kind of precursor. So that's what the story is. And it was preserved by one vote that was cast by Ephraim Cutler in the Constitutional Convention for Ohio when it became a state. And that vote helped prevent Black Americans, free Americans, Black free Americans, from losing all their rights in Ohio and thus becoming almost slaves. There was never an up and down vote on slavery, but Ephraim could see where it was going. And he's a hero, in my opinion. I mean, he's somebody who, you know, was there, and he, for whatever reason, he stood fast and would not accept people who wanted to, for all the reasons they have to want to have slaves, all the financial reasons. He said, no, we're not going to do this. And to me, that's a big story.
I came to Southeast Ohio almost 50 years ago, and to Ohio University, and the main building on the center of the campus there is called Cutler Hall, and it's named after Manasseh Cutler. And I heard Ephraim Cutler's name mentioned quite early on. It came up, and over 50 years, it came up, off and on, but not with a story associated with it. I heard, there's a small town here in Athens County called Amesville, and I've heard his name associated over in Amesville with this coonskin library, but not much about it. And so these are detached mentions of Ephraim Cutler. And so after almost 50 years, I'm here, and just in the last two did I actually look into Ephraim Cutler. And I read his autobiography a year or so ago, and I realized I have the same opinion of him that you do. He's an American hero.
I think there's no doubt about it. I'm not sure why he was so adamant, but definitely, if he wasn't here, things would be different.
Well, in his biography, he said he came to Ohio to be a farmer.
Yeah, and he was
and
that.
What he did was change the world in many ways.
Exactly. And he became a judge, and he founded Ohio University with Putnam and all these libraries, and another thing that I love about him, he founds Ohio University. He and Putnam, neither one of them went to college. He founds libraries because they love to read. That's how they learn what they, experience and reading is how they learn. To me, he's an example of what America is and can be and should be.
Yeah.
So the name Putnam has come up a few times too. So you have Manasseh Cutler and his son Ephraim Cutler. They're big characters in this story. And then Rufus Putnam. And Erin, you guys have a pretty good connection to old Rufus Putnam, don't you? Who's he, and what's your connection
We
to
sure
him?
do. So Rufus was, the head of the Ohio Company of Associates, who led this group in investing in that 1.5 million acres, which was Washington County and is now so much other. But the really pertinent part of this is that one of the museums that we manage, Campus Martius Museum, is literally the place where everything happened. It's literally where the stockade was. It's literally where a lot of decisions. The first court case was held there, and so the Putnams lived in the corner of the stockade, the Campus Martius stockade, and as things got a little safer and people were leaving the stockade, they would take their house down and then go move it to somewhere else in the county or wherever they purchased their or were granted their land in this Northwest Territory. But the Putnams stayed right there. And so their corner of the fort of the stockade became their home, and they lived there for a long time, did some remodeling, did some additions. After they both passed, the house was sold to their family friends and eyes. And then fast forward to 1919 when the DAR wants to save the Putnam House, and they petition the state, and the state finally, by 1928, purchases the house and then builds our museum in 1928, from 1928 to 1931, builds our museum around the house. And then eventually in 1953, I believe it is, the Ohio Company Land Office, which had been in a couple of different places in Marietta, not far away, I mean, very close by, it eventually makes its way to being on our site. So we're literally that place where it happens. And, Larry was talking earlier about, parts of American history that we seem to kind of skip over a little bit. We have about 10,000 visitors every year to Campus Martius Museum, and they come from every county in Ohio, every state in the nation, and at least a dozen foreign countries. In fact, just the other day, I was running out to my car as we're doing preparations and meetings and things. I saw license plates from Idaho, Tennessee, and Illinois, just in our little parking lot, just in one afternoon. People come from all over. And a lot of times we'll get retired school teachers and history teachers, who are interested in history, and they come through and they do the tour with one of our great tour guides of the Putnam House, and they see our Conestoga wagon and walk into these spaces, these two buildings, and then they say, how did I miss this? Why did I not ever know about this? And those retired teachers say, I can't believe I never taught this in my 40 years of teaching, that this whole concept never came up in our textbooks and anything. So we know that through our conversations, even through people as they come to the front desk, we ask for their zip code, and when they give us a number that is not a local number, we'll kind of guess as to where they're from and what brought you here. And a lot of people are coming because they've read the book, or they've read Conrad Richter's books, The Town, The Fields, or they've did some of their genealogy, especially during COVID, and they found a branch of their family that came right through where we are, because they were New Englanders and they were following their path out west. So, we've got great tour guides who continue those conversations. Our staff is always eager to do that. And we try to really connect people with some of those great books and resources, like Larry was talking about, not only the pioneers, but there are other Hildreth's book, Ephraim's, all of those biographies. We try to keep those stocked in the gift shop so that when people say, I'm just learning about this and I want to learn more, that they can, take a little bit with them when they go. But to have One Vote the Musical now as part of our public history programming, my gosh, Tom, we have all of these speakers. You've been a speaker for us before. We have a speaker series. We do all kinds of other events, but to be able to have this as our public history program is it's an incredible opportunity for people to learn not only about, there are historical figures that are part of the play, but Larry and Todd also created some fictional characters as well to kind of help congeal the story and move the story along as that entertainment part. And I'm just really excited to talk to those folks as they're leaving the play and leaving the performances, just as when they're leaving our museum, and learn what more questions they have and what did they learn, and how much they're learning about things that have happened in the past and connecting it to things that are happening now, and that, how can that influence things in the future?
Boy, Larry, and your timing on this is quite good. The founding of Ohio didn't happen this isn't the 250th anniversary of that, but this big, what is it, the semi-quincentennial of America that's going on this year. And this story that you're telling here about founding of Ohio and prohibiting slavery, that's a direct result of the founding of this country. And so this is a really impressive time for you to have come out with this and tell this story right now.
Yeah, Tom, we were lucky because we started this 6 years ago, and we couldn't, at the beginning, we couldn't put our foot on the accelerator for several reasons. I was still head of Mountain Stage then, and I didn't have time to devote myself. But then a couple of years into it, then I pulled out and wasn't longer the head of the show. I still work for it, but I'm not the head of it. They gave me more time, and then we began to in earnest. We wrote songs first, and then we wrote the play, and so it worked out that as it was evolving, suddenly a couple of years ago, we realized if we just continue and don't try to press it, it's going to end up on this year, which was lucky. We weren't smart enough to realize that 6 years ago, but we did when it happened. We said, "Yeah, of course, it's perfect for this year because of the celebratory nature of the country, and also, looking at it practically because there might be more money available to support the project at this time." Then that's just the way it worked out. We've gotten support from America 250 Ohio. Thank them very much. But I think what we're doing is what they want to see done. They want to see somebody doing some kind of celebratory thing. That's exactly what it is. You're celebrating history, and you're trying to get people interested in it and involved in it, and entertaining them. So doing, I've learned a long time ago. You want to teach somebody something first, you got to get their attention, and so that's the idea. The story's great. You know the story. You can tell the story. It's a wonderful story, but that doesn't mean we have to work to make the musical be as good as the story. That's the hard part.
Well, and you made a musical about a story people don't know about in general. The
Correct.
historians, some of the historians know it, and they've been. But speaking of this, you just mentioned the coincidence starting 6 years ago, and it's unfolding right here during the celebration. But consider the coincidence of David McCullough. He was asked to come to Ohio University to give a speech at the graduation commencement in 2004 for their bicentennial, which was connected to this. And so he thought, I better do some research, find out who I'm going to be talking to and what their background is. And I've heard him say on an interview one time when he discovered the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 and how it was connected to the founding of Ohio and all this prohibition of slavery and Ohio University and all. He said, how could I have written so many books about American history and never heard of the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, one of the most important documents in American history? And here's a guy who's written so many books.
Exactly. You would
So the fact that you've done this and you're trying to teach people, we still haven't heard it. And those of us who've heard it, we've been thinking, wow, I just heard a thin layer of this. This is a deeper story than we know.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're right, if McCullough didn't know about it, I don't feel quite so bad because obviously he knows all of that stuff. So I didn't, but I sympathize with him right away. The first thing I thought was, why in the heck isn't this taught everywhere? Because it seems to me to be a huge influence on the United States of America and how we began. And we talk about that in the musical. We talk about that and we sing about it. And the first thing you see in the musical is landing. The landing in 1788, in April 1788. But then you got a flashback right after that to the Bunch of Grapes Tavern when they're talking about this, and they're all there. Manasseh Cutler's there, and Putnam's there, and a bunch of other people, and you see this interesting mix of capitalism and idealism. And Putnam was a patriot among patriots. I mean, he was a general in the Revolutionary War, who Washington depended on. And yet he could see he wanted to recruit other Revolutionary War generals and just officers in general. Why? Because they would be wonderful settlers. They're good citizens. And so another thing that blows my mind is to think that there are more Revolutionary War officers buried in Marietta than anywhere. That's like, what? Not in Boston, not in Lexington, and there they are right there. And because they were recruited sold land to come out and settle there, and they did make good settlers. I mean, they were solid citizens who were trying to make and they also had in mind what was to come. They weren't just doing this. They did see themselves as like people who were setting a pattern that they hoped would be followed by those that came after them. They knew the rest of the Northwest Territory would be settled, made into states at some point. I'm sure they didn't know exactly how, but they were the ones that were trying to blaze the trail.
And they set the precedent when they went with the prohibition of slavery. Go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to say, I hate to quote her without her being present, but Nancy Putnam Hollister, a descendant of Israel, she and I have been involved in several Northwest Ordinance events lately. And her perspective is that this Northwest Ordinance was sort of the playbook on how to live out the Declaration of Independence. Here's what we're holding to be important. Okay, now here's how we're going to actually do it in practice. And here are these, articles that state how we're going to show the respect to people and to the land and to grow this great nation. And I think of that a lot when I think about, these families that left, towns, right? They had a church and they had a doctor and they had a school and they had all of those things, and they left them behind to walk for 4 months until they got to Pittsburgh and then float the boat down, and thinking about everything they gave up to come to a place with, trees and rivers. Um, and I just that kind of revolutionary thought that they're continuing the revolution in growing the country is it's a pretty special point in time for our nation.
Larry, you mentioned a couple times, I've heard the term Bunch of Grapes Tavern. There might be people listening. Hopefully, there's people listening that have no idea what this story is about. And of course, it's about the founding of Ohio and the settling of Marietta in 1788. But the Bunch of Grapes Tavern, what's that? Where is that? How does that fit in this story?
And
In there?
that's in
It's
Boston.
not. It's not in your museum, there, is it, Aaron?
No, no, but my daughter went to college in Boston, just graduated recently, and I would drag her all over the town for all sorts of events while she was there. And I dragged her down to the place that used to be the Bunch of Grapes. There's just a plaque on the wall now of this building. It's very high up. So there's no longer the tavern there, but there's a placard that's been there for a very long time, many decades. This bronze placard has been there. So it's important in Boston, and it mentions Rufus Putnam and it mentions Ephraim Cutler and the Northwest Territory, the Northwest Ordinance. And Boston's got a lot of historic sites. They don't just put stuff up just because, right? They were very selective in choosing to include this. So I think sometimes when we're here locally, we just kind of take stuff for granted, but to know that other people and other places find this really important, I think is um, reassuring and should lift us up.
Yeah, and the Bunch of Grapes Tavern, being a real place, it was where Rufus and some of the other people, several of them were Revolutionary War officers, and then there was Manasseh Cutler, Ephraim's father, who was an interesting man. I mean, he was a lawyer, a doctor, a preacher. I mean, he was kind of a, I think Ben Franklin was one of his heroes, who did a lot of different things. And Manasseh actually got to meet Ben Franklin when he went out to try to sell to convince the Continental Congress to sell land to this company. But they were capitalists. They were real estate developers. They wanted to buy land, package it and resell it. And so in the Bunch of Grapes, we have a song. It happened at the Bunch of Grapes because that was the first meeting. They had other meetings. They were trying to form this corporation and get people who were willing to spend some money to buy this land. But they also made an interesting, and this was Putnam's work. They allowed you to spend some of that those warrants, the script that they gave Revolutionary War officers. You could use part of that to purchase the land. You had to have some actual money, but you could also use that as part payment, which then incentivized the officers to invest because they had a lot of that and they couldn't spend it everywhere. So they decided to do this. And if you wanted to, you could be a pure speculator, just like we do today, buy land and sell it, never see it. And some people did that. But most of the people who bought it ended up going out and settling there. And we have the scene where they leave from Manasseh Cutler's church, where he sees them off, and the way we have it, he's finishing a sermon, and we have his both of his sons are there too, both Ephraim and Jervis. Ephraim did not go in the original group of people that settled. He came later with his wife. But Jervis, Manasseh's other son, did go. He was the first one there, and apparently was the first one that jumped off the boat and started cutting down a tree. That's what the history says. So we celebrate that in the show, and we have that when they're leaving. We place Ephraim at the spot when Manasseh sees them off. He may not have been there. I don't know if he was or not, but the way we do the characters, he's there with his wife, who was pregnant with one of the kids who actually dies on the trip when they went out finally 5 years later. And that the story of these people and the hardships they went through is mind-boggling. I know that the pioneers did this, but this particular one, since I know more about it, every time I think of what they did, every time somebody says I'm working hard, I think, oh, are you really? I mean, what these people did was like beyond imagination, and what their loss, their danger, their loss. That's just the way it was, and that's what you did. And so, God bless them.
think you do a
You
really
know,
good
we
job
go
too,
ahead.
Larry. Sorry. He and Todd do a really good job of telling that story of Leah Cutler, and making that journey. She loses two children. She has two more children, and as she's dying, she knows, Ephraim's got to find himself a wife to help care for the children, and that she's chosen this person, Sally Parker, who he's not even met before, to be and suggest that he marry her after Leah dies. And Larry, Tom, you're going to shake your head and at me or roll your eyes, but I'm not a historian, Tom, and I don't think Larry would call himself a historian
No, of
either.
course not.
But the fact that you went to the Special Collections Library to read some of those letters, and you used some folks' actual words that they've written down to be part of this play and part of the songs is just, I think, something very special, and it doesn't happen everywhere. And that helps tell the women's story, who it's not like you could say to your husband, okay, have fun. I'll see you. I'm just going to stay here. You had to go, and you tell that story very respectfully and very fully, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
no.
Leah and Ephraim obviously had a very close relationship, and um, were helpmates in every way possible. Both were brave, and she had consumption. I mean, it's unbelievable. So she obviously wasn't ever quite up, healthy as she could be. And then she had accidents and everything else. And then at the end, when she does die, that story you said is so dramatic. It's kind of almost hard to believe. She said it wasn't uncommon for men to have to get married or find somebody because they couldn't take care of the children. But she not only said, you got to get married quick, and here's who you're going to marry. And that's to me, that's like, are you kidding me? You're and then she says she's a good person, and he was in the play, we have him going, stop talking about this, But that's what she did, and that's who we married. And we did get to see Todd, particularly. Linda brought us out these letters Ephraim had written to the woman who Leah picked for him, Sally Parker. We read these letters, and some of the lines that are from the letters are in the song. And the words sound archaic. It's because Ephraim wrote them 200 years ago. That's it's pretty dramatic.
You mentioned earlier about you heard somebody say whether they're working hard today, and it's all a matter of perspective because just pulling a meal together back in those days was such a much bigger chore
Yeah,
than anybody can think about today when you stop and get something to
yeah,
eat. And yet that just happens several times a day in between all the other physical existence that they're trying to, whether they're farming or moving on a flatboat or whatever it might be. And that's all beside the fact that they're creating a state and setting a precedent for humanity, really, when they did this. We've mentioned a couple times the Northwest Ordinance. Let's tell people a little bit about what that is. That's the document that got David McCullough's attention late in life after he wrote all those books. And I'll just mention in 1787, and Manasseh Cutler was one of the greatest lobbyists to get it pushed through Congress, apparently. And but what it did was, let me just say what it said: it established a government and a path towards statehood for the Northwest Territory. That's an area northwest of the Ohio River and northwest of the Appalachian Mountains. And it said the ordinance banned slavery in the new territory. It guaranteed civil rights, freedom of religion, due process, and trial by jury. These things are in the news every day today. And in between fixing meals and pushing your boat down the river and hacking down trees and trying to grow corn and do this is the kind of stuff that they were doing and setting a new precedent for joining the Union on equal footing and shaping the American experiment. It's a pretty phenomenal thing.
yeah, it really is. And the fact that they wanted to do this did kind of nudge Congress to get something going, they couldn't sell land to people until they had laws to govern that land. So they had to get with it. The much of grapes was in 86. The Northwest Ordinance was 87. So and Manasseh was there to say, hey, and he wanted to have something to do with it. So I think this whole settlement here did a whole lot more, as you just said. That Northwest Ordinance was a precursor to the Constitution in some ways, included because it also included encouragement of support for education, which is not in our Constitution, and of course neither is banning slavery, but all the other stuff is in there. So it's a pretty wonderful little document, and it's not that long. I think it's 2 pages.
Just 2 pages. Yeah, and then also, that after that a woman would be able to own land after her husband's death. That's a big deal. And that
Unbelievable.
there wasn't a religious test to hold office, right? You didn't have to claim to be a Christian to run for office. They seem, some of those things might seem minor today, but goodness, how that changed and furthered, helped enable the progress of the country.
Yeah, I had to create a character, Tom, because we know a lot about Ephraim, or somewhat about, and Manasseh. We know about Rufus, and there's some other people that in the play that you know about. But I had to create definitely a woman character because we don't have a big book about women from back there. We have letters and we have some things that we know some things, but there's no life of Leah Cutler. There's no life of so and so, and so I just had to make a person, and so I decided to make it a person who personified one of the reasons people went west. She and her husband, Abigail Worthy and Jeremiah Worthy, were sharecroppers up there in Massachusetts. And when would they ever own their land? Never. So, how do you get land? You get a donation tract and you risk your life by going out on the frontier and farming 100 acres. But you love it because once you get it, it's your land. You own it. You never could have that opportunity back where you came from.
Amazing story. Ephraim, he didn't grow up with his dad. His dad sent him to grow up with his parents, and that was in a different state in Connecticut, and Manassas up in Massachusetts. So he was raised by his grandparents. He ran his grandparents' farm when they got older. When he died, he was that, and it was after that that he came here. And I just think of this when he came to Ohio, what 5, 7 years after the settlement at Marietta, he comes out here and he's moving a family of about 5 or 6. I forget the
Yes.
exact
Four
number.
kids in the two, yeah, two of them. It was 7 years later. You're right.
Yeah, and so he's coming. They have to build a flatboat on the Youghiogheny River, and then get on that and come down the Monongahela in the Ohio. And partway down, you mentioned earlier, he lost his 1 year old son, or almost a year old son. Had to bury him somewhere out there in the wilderness, and then further down the river, he loses his oldest daughter. He describes that as the light in their eyes, and have to climb up on the banks and bury her beneath these gigantic trees in a place that it looked like no one had ever been before. Then shortly thereafter, his wife breaks her ribs, and he spent so much time in the water oomping the flatboat over sandbars that he ended up with dysentery. And then they get to Marietta.
Yeah,
They're
exactly
just
right.
getting they're just getting started.
And now we clear the fields and build a house. I mean, it's like it's all beyond
And a
imagination
house and a
nowadays.
state
Yeah, exactly right.
and a
And a future
vision.
for this
Yeah.
country, which is by the way, we're going to do that too while we're at it. I can't really express how much I admire these people and what they did, and they seem to do it just because they thought, well, sure, there was opportunity for them, but it's also they did it because they thought it was the right thing to do. I can't, it's like I don't. They're getting some land out of it, maybe, but they're not getting rich, and they're not. It's just like everything everything Ephraim did, he earned. I mean, he didn't. Nobody. His father wasn't out here telling people to appoint him. He did have a few connections, but not like not like some people did who had really they were gentry and so forth, and they were able to lean on that. These guys were all of them, men and women, were like what I think of as like what Americans are supposed to be.
Yeah. It's an amazing story. Um, you
I
know,
also want to say that um, the cast has been all in on the learning. They're actors and singers and dancers, and they're here to act and sing and dance. They don't need to do the extra work. But we had most of them over to the museum the evening before the first rehearsal, so they could be in the space, and we had some folks there that they could ask questions of. They saw our Conestoga wagon, and they saw how big or not big that actually is and how it's filled with items. We had that actor playing Rufus Putnam, in the Rufus Putnam house. He's doing, and a lot of them have notes that they're taking, and they've done some research before they came. If they're playing a historic figure, they've looked up who that person is. Our so Jervis Cutler was 19 when he jumped off the boat and cut down that tree to be the first person off the boat, and our actor playing Jervis just turned 19 the other day. So it's really been incredibly heartening to know that not only are there visitors to the museum who want to learn more about the story and more about the people, but the actors themselves are really digging into the history themselves because they want to portray it in the way that they think they probably should. It's been an incredible experience in public history and programming and education, and we're not even on the stage yet.
And
Erin, you
so did the
said,
director. Yeah, the director also steeped himself in the story, and he, at first I think he was reluctant. We went through a couple of things. We lost a director, and we had to find another one quickly. And I went to this guy who's head of the marshal that I knew as a friend, and I was asking him, does he know anybody up in this area that could help us? And he said he would do it himself. But I think he first read the story, and then he thought, wait a minute, this is a compelling story that I want to be a part of. And by the way, Tom, we also, it's not our main event, but we touch on the people who were here when they came, the native people. We also touch on African Americans as a kind of a coda to this thing. Kit Putnam is a part of this, and he was part of history. We know about him. But he was the guy who got to vote on the people who went to the Constitutional Convention. And then after the convention was over, he couldn't vote anymore. So that's kind of an irony there. But we also have a coda kind of at the end of the play. We show some people that's some years later deciding to cross the river to go to the Underground Railroad. A man and wife and a kind of a guide. We show that because if they hadn't fought this battle, those people couldn't escape. At least look for escape in Ohio. There would be no Underground Railroad if Ohio was a slave state. So there you are. So in the natives, we have one real character in it, Captain Pipe. And they don't talk, they sing, but their presence is there. That's on purpose. We have him when they're settling. We have Captain Pipe. He's above watching it, because he knew what was coming. His wife, his grandmother, and two of his kids or stuff were killed during the French Indian War by Americans, who at that time were British citizens. So he knew what was going to happen. It's he really was powerless. I mean, in the end, he fought, but you know, there's a big deal here. There's a lot of drama.
there's really no beginning or end to this story either. Erin, a minute ago you said you're not a historian, and Larry is a musician, whatever. You know, all of you, just like your actors, they are now becoming historians as they dig into this, and they're portraying that history, and they're telling that story, and they're becoming part of. We have to tell. We can't all be academic historians, but we got to get that information, and then when we have it, be so excited about it, and then find out different ways to share it. And just running a museum and a historical organization, even if you're not doing the history yourself, you're providing a platform to get that story out there, just as this musical is now a piece of American history.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's yeah. 100. Go ahead, Erin.
I was just gonna say, our mission is to promote and preserve the history of our region, the Northwest Territory, and our inland waterways. And how often does a nonprofit director have a program come to you that meets your mission exactly? Never. That doesn't happen. So, like you said, when I brought this to the board of our board of directors, very few questions. It was all like, this is a gift and this is an opportunity for us to really do our history and interpret it in the way it needs to be interpreted and bring in that other audience and get people talking. Because interpreting the history, Tom, isn't just about laying it out there for them to see. You want them to walk out the door and remember it later on. So to that point of the actors and everybody, starting to do some homework on their own, that's the goal for us as public history, interpreters. I want you to learn a little bit here and get enough nuggets that you're going to walk out the door and think about it later on.
And tell somebody else about it.
Tell somebody else about it.
I mean, that should be our goal in the schools too, is share these stories with kids so they go home and talk to their parents about it. It's not just schoolwork. It's your life. It's where your ancestors came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also influences so much about where we're going. Where we came from, obviously, is going to influence where we're going. And we do. There's a song in the show that's called "Money is a Powerful Agent," and it comes before the vote because what we wanted to do was treat the fact that people say, "Oh, well, slavery's bad." We all know that. Well, there were some people that didn't think slavery was bad. And they weren't all evil devils. Some of them were people who wanted to make money. And that's a powerful force. And you can't just like just say, oh, that's no big deal. It's a big deal. And there were, as you know, there were people who definitely wanted Ohio to be a slave state, including President Thomas Jefferson. And these guys resisted that whole thing. And they wouldn't even let them go one step down that road. When they started taking rights away from the black people, they said, no, 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 stop, because we know where this is going. And that's pretty strong, in my opinion.
In the story, Manasseh Cutler, at least in the story that survives today, say like here in Athens, Ohio, where the Ohio University is, and Cutler Hall, he gets a lot of the credit for. He was the strongest lobbyist to get the ordinance of 1787 passed, and he was the biggest advocate to get the prohibition of slavery in there. And it was a great vision for a new society in a new place. If you ignore the fact that it was somebody else's place when you went there, which is a
Correct.
problem. But it's an amazing vision. But it was his son Ephraim, who he didn't even grow up with, who came out here and slugged it out in the wilderness for 30 or 40 years and created three farms and the Coonskin Library and even though the prohibition of slavery was in the Northwest Ordinance, that didn't become reality until, was it 20 some years later, when they made the state of Ohio and he had to fight to get that provision in the Constitution. And when it came down to it, it only got by a single vote. So
Correct.
Ephraim is the guy who really made it happen.
No, I agree with you 100%. And we have even a thing when they're pushing out, and Manasseh gives his talk, and we have a conversation between Jervis, the guy who went out and cut the tree down, Ephraim's brother, and Jervis's girlfriend, who we made up, that's and she's saying, why don't you stay here and we can get married and go out later? And he's saying, no, no, you heard the way my dad talked about this place. It's like a Garden of Eden. And then she says, I notice he's not going because Manasseh,
Yeah.
he didn't come out till later, but he did have the idea. He did fight for the idea. But Ephraim
Yeah.
was the man who put the who where the rubber met the road. There was Ephraim right there.
I just recently, in this past spring, I learned an interesting thing about the settlement of Marietta associated with Rufus Putnam. So Rufus, and you learn a little bit more about each of these guys the more you think about this story. And so Rufus, a lot of us connect him with the Ohio company purchase and stuff, but you mentioned he was a Revolutionary War general. And so you look at that part of his story, and he was already an amazing American hero for things he did then before he
Yeah,
got here.
yeah,
And then he helped create this Ohio company. And then when he got here, I think I was reading that because he was a general and an engineer, when he got here, one of the first things he did was survey Marietta and lay out 1,000 lots. He surveyed
yeah,
it out into 1,000 lots, but in the process of doing that, he preserved the pre-existing Native American earthworks that were here.
yeah.
Right.
That was by intent, right out of the gate. What an impressive example and precedent to set for those who come later that, and they were saying things like having to respect the efforts of the people who came before you. That's an amazing thing. And in America today, preserving is always a battle. You know, historic preservation, instead of it being a celebration and a recognition of folks who preceded us, it's a battle to try and save it. So
Yep.
these guys set so many precedents. I mean, there's probably a lot of mistakes that we don't focus on that were made, but boy, a lot of good precedents were set in the founding of this particular society.
Yeah. And they weren't as enlightened in many ways concerning women and concerning natives and concerning black citizens as perhaps they could have been because of their times. But what they did, and like you just mentioned what Rufus did there, he also, he compensated a native woman whose husband partner had been murdered, and he said you got to pay her some money for that, and the people said why, you know these people aren't humans, they're savages. And he said no. There was something to me. He was good. Both these people had a goodness that they just was inside them. They wanted to do it right, and as you say, they wanted to respect people and other people and those who came before and those who they were living with. These are leaders that I search for today.
You know, we make a lot of mistakes in the founding of this country, but at least they set in place a system that allows us to repair the errors
Sure. I mean,
and to
we have an
fix them. So,
aspirational
like they say,
constitution.
it's an experiment. It's still unfolding, and we're still trying to achieve the goals and ideals. We're not there yet. And same thing happened with these folks.
Absolutely. But they were trying. And Rufus has a song of his own, and he said, I could build a fort that an army would hold an army, but in my heart, I want to have peace, and all I want to do is raise apple trees. I mean, that's he has a song called Putnam's Apple Tree, and he says, I can do this, I can do that. Others had their schooling. I learned to get things done. That's one of the lines of the song, because that's what he did. But in the end, he didn't want to fight. I mean, he would if he had to, but he didn't want to do that. He wanted to live in peace, and everybody else to do so too. It's a That's why I love this story. I don't get tired of it. Maybe I will. And it's been an intense uh, amount of work because we don't have enough time to do this really. But we're doing 8 hour a day rehearsals that especially with younger people and stuff, they've never had to do. Usually when they do put on a play somewhere in college, you rehearse 2 or 3 hours a night for a while, and you got all these weeks to do it. We didn't have that. We got a couple, 3 weeks here. We got to hammer it together and put it on the stage, and you got to be ready. So,
How many people you got involved in this?
well, there's 18 actors, and there's the director, there's the stage manager and assistant stage manager. There's two
Five
choreographers,
musicians.
lighting, sound, costumers, and then there's us, Todd and I and Erin. And
Five
there are other
musicians.
people at Marietta College. Their theater department's been very helpful in helping us do. We had to have housing for these people and all this sort
Mhm.
of thing. Aaron's been involved that big time, and so are the Marietta College people. So there's quite a few people involved.
And we have five musicians who are predominantly from Athens.
Yeah, six
We have
six
an
in all.
actor who, yeah, six, and we have an actor who lives in Cutler. And our actor portraying Rufus Putnam is originally from Putnam County, West Virginia. He now is Chicago based. So we have another actress who's uh, working in Los Angeles. She's an LA based actress, and she's originally from Pomeroy. And another Chicago based actress who is originally from Athens. So it was great to be able to bring some true professional performers back home for this story. I don't think they would have come home just for any story. This one really speaks to them.
And then there's people like you that are helping organize and produce and promote and do this very thing here. It's all part of the process. It's
Yeah.
a lot of hours on a lot of different sets just to make it happen. And
Yeah, and
so,
we know this isn't going to be perfect the first time around, like Larry said. We're doing the best we can, and we're gonna get up on stage, and we're learning every single day. We learn some different things. We're really appreciative to everyone who is in this with us. Who's on the flatboat with us, getting this up on stage so we can tell the story.
That's a perfect analogy. Yeah, we're on the flatboat. We're going to try to settle this place the best we can.
Yeah.
yeah, we're still on the flatboat. So tell us a little bit about when does this thing happen?
Well, we open next Friday, July 17th. We have shows the 17th and 18th in the evening, and then we have on Sunday the 19th, we have a matinee, and then we repeat them again the following weekend. So Friday, July 24th, Saturday the 25th, and their last show is a Sunday matinee on the 26th. Tickets are general admission and they're just $25 per seat. You can get them at onevotemusical.com. That's where we're running everything through onevotemusical.com. Find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Every day we're getting new followers and new entries and inquiries. If people have questions as well, they can always call or step by Campus Martius Museum. We're open 9:30 to 5, 6 days a week, and then on Sundays we're open noon to 5. So they can call. We can help them over the phone if they want to stop by. We can help them there as well. Yeah. I think those are the main details. It will be on stage, we didn't say, in the Friedrich Theater, which is part of the Herman Fine Arts Center on the campus of Marietta College.
And it's an intimate little theater. There's no bad seats. You're going to be
No.
able to see and hear. It's 150, 160 seats that we're going to sell. And anybody that comes in there is going to be able to see and hear as good as everybody else. It's a perfect place to do the show.
And so you only do it 6 times and that's it?
Yes, sir.
Well, we hope if we'll see how it works. If
I
people
know.
like it, we have plans of perhaps doing it other years and in other places. But first, our first focus is to get it done once.
How,
Yeah.
what's the likelihood of selling out on this thing? Or
We're
are
we're
you that?
selling. We're selling. I just checked ticket sales before I got on the call here with you. We're selling pretty well. There are some seats left, but they are going very quickly. And every day we're selling more and more. So we want to make sure if you
There's
want to come and see it, you want to get in and go ahead and purchase your tickets now.
Yeah,
so
over
there's
the
still
6 nights, there's only about 900 seats. So that's all
Mhm.
there would be. That's all there. And once those are gone, that's it.
are there still opportunities for each of the 6 performances for people,
Yes, at this
depending
point,
on
yes.
when they're looking at their own schedule?
Yeah.
At this point, yes. But I
But
would
they could
say if
go
you want to
quick.
go, get on
Yeah, I know
Yeah. No,
onevotemusical.com.
the closer
no
you
show
get,
is sold
yeah,
out, but a week from now, it'll be a different story.
Yeah.
yeah, closer you get to these things, the faster they sell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what else can we say here? Any other thoughts? I don't want to miss anything if we can share stuff with folks.
We were talking about that Putnam laying out the town. We do have, Tom, I don't know if you saw it. We have the original hand-drawn map by Rufus Putnam in 1802 of the town of Marietta. That's on exhibit right now as well. So when if they're coming into town for the show and they want to stop by the museum, be in Rufus Putnam's house, they can see his map, see the Conestoga wagon and the land office and learn about, the other 48 and some of the other folks that are represented in the play. Um, Campus Martius is open 7 days a week, so we're ready to help extend that education. And then also on this upcoming Monday, July 13th, that is the anniversary date of the Northwest Ordinance. So every year in Marietta, we kind of celebrate that. And Dr. Paul Finkelman, who's a law and constitutional scholar, will be in Marietta the whole day. So at 10 o'clock in the morning on Monday the 13th, he'll be down at Muskingum Park, like they celebrate every year. And then in the evening, we'll have another event at 5:30 at Campus Martius Museum, another session by Dr. Finkelman.
And I want to make sure we thank the Ohio Arts Council, who have been a part of this since the beginning. They supported the writing of this, and now they're supporting the production of it. And as I mentioned before, America 250 Ohio, they got in and were helped us out right in the beginning, which we really appreciate. Marietta College, of course, and it's and the thing is what it's called. It's the Center for innovation, Appalachian innovation. I can't
Yes, sir.
remember that, but
Yeah,
they
Center for
also are
Appalachian Innovation.
supporting. There you go, and they're supporting us too, as well as a lot of individuals and local people and some companies too. So we had to raise money for this. We didn't have the money in our pockets when we started, and people have chipped in, and of course ticket sales help that too. So we're going to cross the finish line one way or the other.
And Larry, you and Todd drove over here to Athens one day to present at the Lyceum luncheon. And those are all expenses when you get, especially in today's high gas prices. It's another
Yeah, it's
cost
true.
of
Yeah.
doing business, and that was a good part of a day. So this is a lot's gone into this, and when people show up, they're just going to see what they see, and they won't have that much
Yeah.
of an idea of what all went into this. Kind of, kind of like you and Ephraim, behind the scenes, all the work you're doing just to get the job done here.
Yeah, and you mentioned that's funny because you mentioned with Erin the whole idea of promotion and organization. It's like building a little business that you have to build, and there all these little parts of it have to work. If they don't, one part of it can make everything shut down. So it's been the creative part over here, and then the other part. It's all one thing. So you're right, and I appreciate everybody who's done because there's been a lot of people, a lot of them volunteers do a lot of stuff that we couldn't afford to pay for, and it wouldn't happen without them.
Well, hey, that sounds good. I'm looking forward to this program, and I hope it's a roaring success. I don't see why it wouldn't be. And I tell you what, you're gonna send a whole lot of people home after this, and they'll become the next generation of historians trying to tell this story because it's like discovering a nugget of gold or something like that. How did all these people walk past us all these times? They've never picked it up, and they're gonna want to tell people. It's an amazing story. So.
It is, and now you're exactly correct. And I hope that's what happens. I hope people walk out of there going, "That's unbelievable! I can't believe this happened here with these people." And how come we don't know about it? Well, now we do. Let's go tell other people.
Well, hey, thank you guys for this conversation. Larry Groce, uh, playwright and musician and all, and Erin Augenstein from Campus Martius and Ohio River Museums and the Northwest Territory. Wow, there's a lot that's going to come out in the next, I don't know, starting now.
Yes, sir.
I think you guys are helping open some floodgates about some amazing information about this region and its influence on the Midwest and on America and on the world. And so thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Tom.
Tom.
Thank you for talking on Echoes from the History Center. Okay.